Well, here we go again. 'Tis the season to be jolly. One of these days, or one of these years, maybe, I'm going to get this right. And the world will be a progressive paradise. Playing music. Here we go. You are listening to KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, at 103.3 FM and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. And this is the Midnight Skeptic. The views of the Midnight Skeptic are not, repeat, not necessarily the views of KPCA or any of its affiliates. Okay, hello again. This is show number 48. I'm recording this on Wednesday. We got 3 more days to go until Christmas, and this is going to be a very special show for all of you out there. This is Wednesday the 22nd, and it's going to be broadcast on at the usual time this coming Sunday, the 26th, the day after Christmas at 9 p.m. as usual. For those of you gathering together in joyous Christmas gatherings for family and friends, just be real careful. The Omicron is exploding as I speak, and I hope all of you have had actually what's going to amount to your 3rd vaccine shot. And they're saying it's a booster shot, but really it's now it's considered 3 shots for Pfizer and the one that I had at Kaiser, Moderna. So just be careful out there. And if you're going out to indoor activities, just, wear your face masks. Really help us all out. Okay. If you have views that are more or less like mine, I got to remind you that they aren't necessarily the views of Petaluma Community Access, but they damn well should be. My views are, as you all know by now, the right views to have. And I say that with the utmost bit of humility. Okay. And oh yeah, if you have any gripes about what I say or what I'm doing here or what I'm blathering on about, if you have any hints as to how this show could be made better, I know it's hard to believe, but this show could be made better. Send email, hate mail, death threats to themidnightsskeptic@gmail.com. All lowercase, all one word. I'll get it, and I'll treat the suggestions with the usual, seriousness that I treat suggestions that have been made to me before. Stan down in Pacifica has made some suggestions, and I've tried to find more good news for his benefit. Anyhow, okay, speaking of Stan, here comes some shout-outs. My international guys out there, a couple in the UK, a couple in Ireland and Germany, and one new listener, viewer, whatever, at the Czech Republic, and then a couple in Australia and New Zealand. If you guys are listening out there and you have access to email, well, you probably do if you're listening to me, send me an email about what you think about what I'm blathering on about. The Midnight Skeptic at gmail.com. Okay. There's my international people. And then the East Coast. Geraldine Goldfinger, Dr. Dave in North Carolina, Amelia Beamer in the eastern part of Florida, east coast of Florida, Nelson and Alice on the west coast of Florida. And Shannon Reed in Arkansas, she listens every now and then. And down in Arizona, my brother Brandon and his wife Mina and Andrea, their daughter, my niece, who's a nurse down there at a hospital near Santan Valley in Arizona. Please, please, please take care of yourself, Andrea. Wear your PPE. And then her husband, Tim, and the three little terrorists who just recently went to see Santa. The picture that they forwarded to me, the middle child was crying up a storm. The older one was chuckling, and the younger one was trying to figure out what it was all about. Anyway, the Sonora gang, Bob and Sandy Fisher, thanks for, hosting the dinner last Saturday night. It was fun, really fun. And Bob and Robert and Colleen Finnegan were at the dinner as well. And Martha, again, she's a CNA up in Sonora. And please, please wear your PPE and take care of yourself. And Brad Fisher, take care of yourself. And Darrell Larson, Judy May, Leonidas Maciel, and a new occasional listener, I guess, Kathy Francis, and down in Mexico City, Rosie Lopez Negrete. She listens in every now and then. Ex-Sonora 8th grader, who I went to 8th grade with. Locally, Stan and Kathy down in Pacifica, Rich and Kathy Berger in Sebastopol, Tom and Nancy Throw here in Petaluma, and Tim Conrad here in Petaluma. Great photographer. Keep taking those pictures, Tim. Kevin and Lori in Katati, and Yvonne Santos down in San Francisco, and the Sacramento people, Dave and Rosita Takach. And then Mickey Huff, a professor of history and communications at Diablo Valley College. He commutes down to that. I guess he's on school break now. And he's the godfather of Project Censored. And I guess his program is over by now on KPCA LP 103.3 FM. Yeah, it's about 3:15 now. So his show goes from 1 to 2 here in Petaluma. And then it's repeated again over in Berkeley, KPFA 94.1 on Fridays, 1 to 2. Okay, listen in. He's got a great show, and he's about as lefty as they get, almost as lefty as I am. Okay, down in L.A., Aunt Jackie and Wayne, they listen in every now and then. And then over in Stockton, Kathy Clark, every now and then listens. I won't be able to make it over to Stockton to be with my Stockton relatives, but, a lot of things have to accommodate the COVID-19 scourge that's working its way through the population of the country, the world, actually. Okay. So much for the shout-outs. Okay, good news. After years in the firearms industry, Ryan Busse, B-U-S-S-E, I think he pronounces it Bus or Bussy, or I think. Okay. Realized his ideas about marketing and using guns had grown out of step with the times. And he wrote a book about this. It's called, just one word, Gunfight. And it's a part memoir of his life and part treatise on gun policy in America. Hello, NRA. Views on gun policy have hardened over the last 4 decades. Oh, brother. And the political divide has become increasingly hard to bridge. Hardcore gun nuts and libtards, lefties like me, we just can't really talk to each other about this topic. If you're interested in becoming more informed about the gun issues, get and read the book Gunfight by Ryan Bussey. Bussey, I don't know. It's spelled Busse. Okay. It'd be a good stocking stuffer for the lefty in your life. Okay. Just a moment here. Let me adjust my notes that I should look at more often than I do. Okay. More Texas book banning news. The right-wing censorship push is moving from school libraries to regular town libraries now. In Victoria, Texas, and that's about 100 miles southeast of San Antonio, Dana Williams Capone, that's capital Dayna, Williams hyphen Capone, as in Al Capone, I guess. She's the director of library services, and she says the number of complaints about books is the most she's seen in her nearly 13 years of working at the Victoria Public Library. In August, a couple of months ago, her office received about 40 formal requests for review of books, primarily books for children and young adults that touch on topics of the usual right-wing suspects, same-sex relationships, sexuality, and especially race. Oh, man. After Williams Capone and her staff reviewed the requests, they decided to keep the books in the library. Yay! Yay, librarians who are sensible, not like the MAGA heads that infiltrate the polite society. Okay, I'm going to be ranting plenty on this show, so I don't need to start in right now. Okay. After Williams Capone and her staff reviewed the requests, they decided to keep the books in the library. Residents, who I suspect are Republican MAGA heads, pushed forward, appealing the decision to the library's advisory board for about half of the books. Last Wednesday, which was, December 15th, a week ago today, the library's board voted not to remove the books from library shelves. Very good. Very good, very good, very good. One Victoria resident who was for removal of the books was 64-year-old Cindy Herndon. And this is a quote from her. It's just about protecting the children and not exposing them to things that they really don't need to see right now. Right-wingers latch on to this protecting the children phrase. Now, children, what do they mean by that? Like 4-year-olds, preschoolers, those are children. 7, 8-year-olds, second, third graders, they're children in their view. 8th graders, I guess they're children in their viewpoint. Well, in their view, they're children all the way up until, I guess, they graduate from college. Okay, lost my place here. Things they don't really need to see right now. One of the books she wanted removed was, my listeners out there, please go out and get this book. I was not aware of it until I read this article about book banning. Okay, one of the books Cindy Herndon, was entitled The Black Flamingo. It's by Dean Atta. It's a coming-of-age novel about a mixed race Right there, that upsets right-wing MAGA-head conservative Republicans. A mixed-race gay teenager in London, this is not even in this country, it's London, who becomes a drag artist. I hope all my listeners out there are aware of what drag is. It's a, it's a performance piece. It's pretending that it's usually guys who dress up in drag and pretend that they're women, an exaggerated form of theatrical women. Anyway, okay, a drag artist is how he, I guess, performed and made a living, or, Herndon, okay, Cindy Herndon, who read the book. What? She actually read the thing she wants to ban? Yeah. Said she was opposed to it because it seemed to her to, quote, and this is a quote, sexualize children, especially into alternative lifestyles, and make them want to be someone else than who they were born to be. Now, this is a trope of all right-wing MAGA-head conservative Republicans, especially when it comes to transgender kids. I've made fun of them countless times on this, Midnight Skeptic rant. Their idea is, and it's an ignorant idea, one of many ignorant ideas that the religious right, the conservative Republican MAGA-head right is, if you were born with a penis between your legs, then you a boy. If you was born with a wooey between your legs, then you a girl. God don't make no mistakes. You just gotta be what you was born to be. Okay, that's my attempt at making fun of ignorant Southern Republicans. Anyway, and she uses this word lifestyles. The anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ Republicans always use that word lifestyle as if what they're getting at is that being gay or being trans is just a choice. They don't believe that anybody was just born the way they are or want to change the way they are because of changes in how kids think about themselves. Okay, I'm riffing now. I've talked a lot about LGBTQ issues on other shows before, but okay. Anyway, this ignorant quote from Cindy Herndon. Let me say it one more time. Wallow in its ignorance. She said she was opposed to it because it seemed to her, she's an expert, I guess, to, quote, sexualize children, especially into alternative lifestyles, and make them want to be someone else who they were born to be. And I can hear the right-wing evangelical Christian thought process just dripping out of that quote. Okay, I'm going to continue this just for a second. Black Flamingo was voted Time Magazine's best young adult book of all time. I have not looked up Time Magazine's young adult book polling, so there's a lot of really good young adult books out there, but the Time Magazine's editors voting this to be the all-time greatest, well, I'm going to have to check that out. I will get back to you all about this. And the School Library Journal award for a great read for young adults. Okay, so let me say the title of the book again. It's Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. And I didn't look up him either, so I don't know. I'd never heard of him until I read all this about book burning in Republican areas. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's a bit of good news. Okay, I like to find good news where I can find it. Okay, both of Canada's House of Commons and the Canadian Senate, excuse me, approved a bill banning conversion therapy. Research in the U.S. has consistently shown conversion therapy results in increased suicide attempts and other negative mental health outcomes for LGBTQ young kids. Conversion therapy there's a lot of states, mainly states that are governed by Democratic governor and Senate and representatives and all that have outlawed conversion therapy. Here in California, it's outlawed. It's a quack psychological therapy propounded by right-wing Christian evangelicals because they just can't handle the fact that some kids are attracted to other kids of the same gender. They can't handle the fact that some kids' mental inward thoughts about themselves do not coincide with their physical sex. They just can't wrap their minds around that. So they've come up with this conversion therapy where they beat them over the head with the Bible and say things like, Jesus wants you to be straight. Don't get me started on that. Okay. But anyway, that was good news. Canada has banned conversion therapy. Okay. Bad news on the book burning front. Oh, God. Anti-CRT parents in Tennessee. All right, CRT, you all know what I mean by that. Critical race theory. I'm just going to say CRT from now on when I talk about that topic. Okay, anti-CRT parents in Tennessee, oh, God, object to, this is a book title, a young children's book title, Ruby Bridges Goes to School. And it was written by Ruby Bridges herself. Robin Steenman, Steenman, who heads Moms for Liberty, the Williamson County of Tennessee chapter, objected to the line in the book, and this is a quote from the book, large crowds of angry white people who didn't want black children in a white school. Okay, that's exactly what it was. Ruby Bridges, when she was going to school, her first day of first grade, she did not go to this school in kindergarten. She went to a blacks only school. I'm going to be reading some of a Ruby Bridges book in just a moment. Anyway, Moms for Liberty. I'm going to be talking maybe on the next show next week about this right-wing group of Karens that constitute Moms for Liberty, and they are a nationwide group of ultra right wing, mostly women, mothers, but there are some guys that I saw in this. I did look them up briefly to see who Moms for Liberty really are. They are MAGA heads, of course. Anyway, let's see. I'm off my notes again. She claimed, okay, that quote. Okay, large crowds of angry white people who didn't want black children in a white school. She claimed that sentence was too harsh and didn't offer redemption at the end of the book. She also objected to another book that was about segregation and used words like injustice and inequality in grammar lessons. Okay. This Robin Steinman has got to be the queen of the MAGA heads. Steinman pulled her own daughter out of public school. I'm not sure what grade her daughter was in, but initially over, let's see, when did she do this? Oh, I think at the end of August or September of this year, over the mask mandates. And that falls right into line with other stupid-ass MAGA-head Republican conservatives, members of the cult of the orange sociopathic bloat bag. Okay. Steinman pulled her daughter out of public school last year over the mask mandate, but Steinman says it's not because of the mask mandate anymore, but because of lesson plans she claims make students feel bad about their race. I do not believe that for a minute. It's always the parents that get involved in this kind of crap and think that they know how their kids are really feeling. Okay. In a CNN interview, she said, quote, this is her speaking, Robin Steinman, the school bus goes right in front of my house and my kid is dying to ride it, but not until I have deemed that the curriculum is safe and will do no harm. In May of this year, Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee signed House Bill. I guess it passed the Senate first and then went over to the House. Anyway, HB 580, banning CRT in Tennessee. Okay, I'm all worked up now. I gotta take another sip of coffee here. All right. Now, I'm going to hold this book up for the YouTube people to see. Okay, it's a children's book, and Chelsea Clinton wrote the first She Persisted book. And this is a series of books about women who persisted. And I think she got it into her head to write this series of books. And let me back up a bit. She wrote the first couple of books in the series, and then she has gotten together with some other children's books writers to continue the series. This particular book, in the She Persisted series, was written by Kekla Magoon, and it's called Ruby Bridges. Okay, but let's see, who are the women that are in this series? Harriet Tubman, Claudette Colvin, I don't know who she is. Sally Ride, the astronaut. Virginia Apgar, don't know. Nellie Bly. Sonia Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice. Florence Griffith Joyner, the track star. And Ruby Bridges. Clara Limnick. Margaret Chase Smith, Senator. Maria Tallchief, who very recently, within a week or two ago, passed away. She's a ballet dancer and a Native American. Helen Keller and Oprah Winfrey. Okay, I'm not sure that. Well, okay, don't get me started on Oprah Winfrey, who foisted Dr. Oz on the public. Okay. Anyway, this particular book that I'm going to be reading excerpts from is called Ruby Bridges, and it was written by Kekla Magoon. Okay. When Ruby Bridges was born in 1954, her parents brought her home full of hope that their daughter would grow up in a better world than they had. Little did they know how big a role Ruby herself would play in building that better world. Time check, real quick. Sorry. Okay. Ruby and her parents lived on her grandparents' farm in Tylertown, Mississippi. The family loved their land, and they loved being together. Farming was very challenging work. Everyone helped out, even young Ruby. As she grew, she visited her other grandparents' farm, too. She and her cousins picked beans and cucumbers and helped with canning to preserve them. The Bridges family worked very hard, but they did not have a lot of money. Ruby's father tried to get another job to help support the family, but it was hard to find a business that would hire him. Mississippi, well. Okay, the United States of America was a difficult place for black people. See, a sentence like that would set off the MAGA heads. They would get their underwear worked up into a knot over that. The anti-CRT people would say, they're writing about CRT. United States of America was never a difficult place for black people. Okay. Sorry about the rant. That wasn't in this book. I'm just editorializing here. Difficult place for black people like Ruby's family to live. Okay. Mississippi was an especially hard place for black family to live because of certain laws that affected black people. These laws enforced a system called segregation. Are you listening, Tate Reeves? Tate Reeves, governor of Mississippi. Why don't you listen to the Midnight Skeptic once in a while? And, if you object to things like I'm reading, email me, themidnightskeptic@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, they had to eat in separate restaurants and live in separate neighborhoods. At movie theaters, there was one door for white people and a separate door for black people. On every bus, there were separate seating sections for black people and white people. In the park, there was one drinking fountain for black people and another one for white people. Black children went to all black schools, and white children went to all white schools. The worst part was the schools. What was the schools' water fountains and seating areas for black people were not as nice as the ones for white people. This was very unfair. Black people felt angry and frustrated about the way they were being treated. But the country had been using segregation laws for a long time, and people were used to it. Some people were eager to see these laws change, but many others were afraid. Republicans. When Ruby was 2 or 3 years old, running around on her grandparents' farm, she had no idea what segregation was. She did not know that people were going to treat her unfairly because of the color of her skin. She had never even spoken to a white person. She was happy in her all-black world. Ruby's parents knew all about segregation. They worried about Ruby's future. Ruby's parents did not know how to read or write because they hadn't been able to go to school. They wanted Ruby to have a chance to learn. They wanted her to have every opportunity that a white child might have. So they decided to leave their small Mississippi town and moved to New Orleans, Louisiana. Ruby's parents believed that living in a big city would give Ruby a chance to go to a good school. Why? Well, in 1954, the year Ruby was born, something important had happened. The United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, heard a story about a black girl named Linda Brown, who wanted to go to the best school in her city, which was an all-white school. After hearing her story, the Supreme Court decided that segregation laws were unfair because they stopped black children like Linda from going to the best schools. The court ordered schools across the country to integrate, which meant that they needed to allow black and white students to attend the same schools. Brown versus Board of Education. Okay. Ruby was 4 years old when her family moved to New Orleans. It had also been 4 years since the Supreme Court ordered schools to integrate, but New Orleans schools were still segregated. Ruby had not started school yet, but she knew that she would start kindergarten soon. Her family moved into 2 bedrooms of a house in an all-black neighborhood. Ruby and her 3 younger siblings shared a bedroom. She missed her grandparents and the farm, but she was able to visit them in the summers. My world in those days was comfortable and safe, Ruby said. She did not know that was about to change. Okay. Now, if reading a children's book like this, and I think it's like second or third grade level reading, if that makes little snowflake white kids ashamed to be white, then it's not being presented right. I don't believe for a minute that parents know what their kids are actually thinking if they were to read a book like this. It's always the parents that get involved in this kind of right-wing crap. And, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's something. Maybe my brains were beginning to fall down my throat. Okay, chapter 2. Ruby did get to go to school in New Orleans, just like her parents had hoped. When she was 5 years old, she started kindergarten at Johnson Lockett Elementary School. It was an all-black school. Even though the Supreme Court had ordered schools to integrate, Louisiana was one of several states that were very slow to change. The entire South, especially Republicans, are slow to change. I'm editorializing again. Forgive me. Ruby loved kindergarten. She was good at school. She got high grades. She behaved well in class and she made new friends. Toward the end of the school year, Ruby's mother told her that she was going to be taking a special test. One day, she and her mother got dressed up and went downtown. They rode the bus to the school board building. They went inside where they were sent to wait in a huge room. It was full of about 100 other black children. They were all going to be taking the same test. Ruby took the test, but she didn't have any idea why she was taking it. The truth was, New Orleans schools were finally going to be integrated. The test would help decide which black students would go to all-white schools. The test was very hard on purpose. The white people who designed the test hoped it would be so hard that none of the black students would pass. But Ruby did pass. She was one of only 6 students who did. And so that summer, Ruby was invited to attend William Frantz Elementary School, an all-white school. William Frantz, capital Frantz. There were several good things about William Frantz Elementary School. It was very close to Ruby's house, much closer than her old school had been. It was also known to be a very good school, better than her old school had been. And it would be the first time that a black student had gone to William Frantz. So Ruby would be part of a much bigger change taking place across the country, a change known as the Civil Rights Movement. Ruby's parents weren't sure that sending their daughter to William Frantz was a good idea. A lot of people were very angry about the idea of integration. Sending Ruby to an all-white school might put their whole family in danger. KKK, anybody? At first, Ruby's father said no. He did not want to put Ruby or the rest of them at risk. But Ruby's mother knew it was the right thing to do. Yay, Mom. They discussed, debated, and argued. Important people came to their house to talk to Ruby's parents. Lawyers and activists from an organization called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, reminded Ruby's parents that this opportunity was a very big deal. The NCAAP lawyers and activists had worked hard to get the courts to support integration in the first place, so their opinion mattered a lot to Ruby's family. Ruby's parents did not stop feeling afraid, but they believed strongly in their daughter's education. They decided to be brave. Finally, Ruby's parents agreed to let her go to the new school. This is a quote. "I was going to integrate William Frantz Public School, and I was going alone," Ruby said later to the author of this book. For Ruby herself, there was never really a choice. She simply followed her parents' instructions. Quote, "If they told you to do something, you did it," she said. The night before Ruby's first day at the new school, her mother tried hard to prepare her for the strange things ahead. Her mother said, "There might be a lot of people outside the school," Ruby's mother told her, "but you don't need to be afraid." At that moment, Ruby was not afraid. She was only sad that she was not going to be in the same school with her newly made friends anymore. At 6 years old, she had no idea what a huge moment in history she was about to be a part of. Okay, chapter 3, the first day of school. Another time check. Okay. At William Frantz, the school year started in September. That year, which was 1960, Ruby did not start school there in September like the other children. She had to wait because people who did not want school integration to happen were trying to get the courts to change their minds. It was mid-November before Ruby started attending her new school. On Ruby's first day of school, several large men came to the Bridges family's front door. The men were federal marshals, which meant they were like police officers who worked for the U.S. federal government. They offered Ruby a ride to school in their car. This is a bit strange. After all, the William Frantz School was only a few blocks from Ruby's house. Most students walked to school. This is a quote. "I learned later they were carrying guns," Ruby explained about the marshals. Many white people in New Orleans were angry that the schools were being integrated. The U.S. government feared that some of the angry people might try to hurt Ruby, so the marshals were there to protect her. Ruby acted very bravely that day. She got into the car with the federal marshals and her mother, who made Ruby promise to behave herself at school. They drove the few blocks. The drive took longer than usual because there were hundreds of people blocking the street. When Ruby first saw the crowd, she thought maybe they were there for Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is a huge carnival celebration that takes place every spring in New Orleans, except it was November, which is not the right time of year for Mardi Gras. But the crowd that had, that kind of excited energy about it. People were laughing and smiling even, though they were there for a very upsetting purpose: to prevent one small girl from going to school. The white protesters began to chant, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate. MAGA heads. The 1960s version of MAGA heads. I'm editorializing again. Forgive me. The marshals got out of the car first, and Ruby came out after them. She couldn't see the faces of anyone in the crowd. She was small, and the marshals stood protectively around her, blocking her view. They walked through the crowd toward the school. When they got closer, Ruby could see that the school building looked bigger and fancier than her previous school. It seemed like an important place. Ruby and her mother went to the principal's office and waited there. They waited and waited. Quote, "We didn't talk to anybody," Ruby recalled. "I remember watching a big round clock on the wall. When it was 3 o'clock and time to go home, I was glad." On that first day at William Frantz Elementary School, Ruby didn't even set a foot in the classroom. Meanwhile, there was a great deal of chaos going on in the school. White parents raced into the office and into the classrooms, pulling their children out of the building in protest. The crowd outside grew larger. Many white people remained angry and confused about why their protest hadn't worked. When Ruby and her mother walked out of school, the crowd had grown even bigger. Protesters held signs with threatening messages. They shouted hateful words at Ruby. One protester had a black doll in a coffin. It was a threat. When Ruby noticed that doll on her way out of school, it was the scariest thing she had ever seen. That moment was perhaps the first time she realized that she and her family were risking their lives to help make integrated schools a reality in New Orleans. That night, Ruby's father called her his brave little girl. She had been brave indeed, and she would have to keep being brave. The hardest part of her journey was still to come. Chapter 4, A Classroom for One. On Ruby's second day at William Frantz School, there was still a big crowd outside the school. There was still a lot of anger and shouting, but inside it was safe. Ruby went to her first grade classroom. She met her teacher, a white woman named Mrs. Barbara Henry. At first, Ruby was surprised to be the only student in Mrs. Henry's class. The school had decided to move all the white children to a different classroom. The school had to allow black students into the building, but some teachers hoped they could still keep classes segregated. Every day after that, Ruby and Mrs. Henry spent all day alone in the classroom with the federal marshals guarding the door outside. I grew to love Ruby and to be awed by her, Mrs. Henry said. It was an ugly world outside, but I tried to make our world together as normal as possible. The teacher, Barbara Henry, was from Boston. I don't know what brought her down to New Orleans, but anyway, she was a northerner. Mrs. Henry and Ruby sat side by side in the classroom doing lessons. Sometimes they would go together to the chalkboard and work there instead. They practiced reading and spelling and math. They sang songs, did puzzles, and played games to fill the time. Ruby was not allowed to go to the cafeteria or the playground. She had to spend her lunch hour all alone in the classroom, while Mrs. Henry had her lunch with the other teachers. Some days, Ruby did not eat the sandwich her mother had packed. She hid it instead, hoping that she might get invited to join the others in the cafeteria. When Mrs. Henry found out, she began staying with Ruby to keep her company during lunchtime, too. I became very attached to her, Ruby said. She had a polite, kind manner that I admired. I guess this is Ruby talking as an adult to the author of this book. Mrs. Henry and Ruby liked each other very much, but it was often hard to have school with just two people. Mrs. Henry missed teaching a full class of students. Ruby missed having other children to talk to. It was a difficult time for both of them. Still, neither one of us ever missed a day. Mrs. Henry said later on, it was important to keep going. I don't know about this, but I hope that Miss Barbara Henry maybe wrote a book or a memoir of her experience with this. I'm going to find that out, and I'll get back to you all later. Ruby's world consisted of school with Mrs. Henry during the day, spending time with her friends in her black community in the afternoons, and being home with her parents and siblings in the evenings. At first, it was hard for her to imagine all the unrest that was happening around New Orleans during that time, all because one little black girl was going to a new school. White people were still angrily protesting. Ruby's family's choice to support integration began to affect the family more and more. They received threatening notes. That's going on today from the cult of the orange sociopathic black bloat bag. White-owned stores turned Ruby's mother away. Ruby's father was fired from his job. Neighbors guarded their house at night to make sure no one came to act on the terrible threats. People around the country knew that Ruby's family was going through a hard time. Many people wrote letters to encourage Ruby and to remind her whole family to stay strong. Some people even sent money to help them survive while Ruby's father struggled to find a new job. Many people appreciated what Ruby was doing. Going to school every day might have seemed like a normal thing to do, but for Ruby it was so much more. As the first black student at William Frantz Elementary School, Ruby was setting a great example of what equal education could be like. When the school year was almost over, Mrs. Henry convinced the other teachers to let the white students from the other first grade class spend time with Ruby. There were only 4 students in that class because so many parents were keeping their children out of school in protest. One of the white boys refused to play with her because she was black. Finally, Ruby understood why she had gotten kept apart from the others. At the end of the school year, Mrs. Henry gave Ruby very high grades in all her subjects. She had learned so much, but the principal of the school tried to lower Ruby's grades. Some people still did not want Ruby's hard work to prove that black and white students could learn together in the same school, that they could all do well. But a big change was coming. One principal could not stop it. Not even the big angry crowd of hundreds could stop it. Soon, more schools in New Orleans and all around the country would follow Ruby's example. It sounds amazing, but one 6-year-old girl helped all black people across the whole country gain the chance for an equal education. I'm going to stop reading this book right here. The next chapter is chapter 5. It's called Following Ruby's Lead. It takes up in 2nd grade when everything was, well, not everything, but most things were very different then. But this is an example of, I guess, a 2nd or 3rd grade level book that has Republicans' underwear all tied up in knots. These people that gathered in front of William Frantz Elementary School and constructed a coffin with a little black doll in it and sent threatening notes to her family, those are the same types of people that are today's Republicans, in my view. There may be a small handful of sensible, compassionate Republicans. A few of my friends and a few of my relatives that are Republicans, you guys would not have done this. And I'm not talking about you. And you know who you are. But the angry MAGA heads that invade school board meetings about mask mandates and vaccine mandates, and they stick their heads through the windows of cars driven by the school board members and say, "We know where you live. We're going to come for you." Those are the same people that back in 1960 were protesting outside of William Frantz Elementary School. And that's why I call them MAGA heads, stupid MAGA heads, and members of the cult of the orange sociopathic bloat bag. They've taken over the Republican Party, and for the most part, that's what the Republican Party nowadays has become. Okay, I've got to play out music. You have been listening to The Midnight Skeptic on KPCA LP, Petaluma, California. And we're at 103.3 on the FM dial and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. support community radio at patreon.com/Petaluma Community Access. And remember, think critically, think logically, but live joyously, and most importantly, pet your cats. It's 59 minutes, and I'm sure that for KPCALP 103.3 FM, I've been cut off already at 58 minutes, but my YouTube people can still see this. But until next week, and I'll finish up this book or excerpts from it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. There will certainly be new issues that I can rant about. So until next week, bye-bye.